I am here to discuss the North Bay Forest Improvement Program. And for those of you who aren't familiar with me or the RCD, I wanted to give you a quick intro. I am a forestry project manager. Oh, there we go. And the Sonoma RCD is a non-regulatory special district that serves to help individuals and community groups drive solutions to their most pressing natural resource concerns. So we help, in addition to administering North Bay Forest Improvement Program with our partner Conservation Works, we also provide technical support to applicants and participants in the program. So not only do we administer it, we also help you get your applications in and looking up to shape. So let's start. I'm sure a few of you are already familiar, and for those who have attended my last presentation about North Bay Forest Improvement Program, some of this will be a little bit of a reiteration with some new clarifications and additional information. And I'm hoping we can get kind of into the nitty-gritty of the application itself later on in the presentation. So North Bay Forest Improvement Program is an innovative incentives program. Sorry if this is blocking. That provides public funds to private landowners to increase forest health and wildfire resilience. So, like I said, it's designed for private, non-industrial forest landowners in the North Bay. This program is exclusive to Sonoma, Napa, Mendocino, and Lake counties. And it's kind of an adaptation of previous incentive programs like EQIP and CFIP. For those who aren't familiar, CFIP is the California Forest Improvement Program, and EQIP is NRCS's Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So it's modeled after these two, but it's localized to the North Bay and accounts for the work, for the cost of work in this area. And this particular program is funded by CAL FIRE's Wildfire Resilience and Forestry Assistance Grant. And like I said, administered by Conservation Works. So just to give a brief overview of the program goals, we really are striving to reduce the vegetative fuel loads and risks of wildfire, reduce insect infestation, and reduce disease epidemics. Recognizing that a lot of landowners within Sonoma County are dealing with sudden oak death or, Douglas fir beetle, other sorts of pests and pathogens that can severely degrade the health of your forest while also increasing the wildfire risk. So the intent of the program is to increase the pace, scale, and effectiveness of forest treatments in the North Bay. We recognize that a lot of landowners are faced with tons of constraints when they want to manage their forest, even though there is the desire there to steward it. Cost of work, finding contractors, timing windows of operations, it can be really challenging to do on your own. So hopefully this program can help you start to manage your forest in the way that you'd like to. So the NBFIP program actually incorporates two different kind of pools of funding and projects that you can fund or apply to. The first category is planning. So you can apply to develop a forest management plan with a registered professional foresters. And the program will reimburse you for some of the cost of F&P development. Now, it won't cover the entire cost, just like with implementation. This is only a cost share, but it will defray the cost of developing a management plan. And one of the reasons you might want to develop a management plan is because it serves as a great long-term planning document for you, your heirs, whoever else is managing the property to kind of understand what your goals are, objectives, and how you might achieve those. In addition to that, FMPs are helpful when you're applying to certain other cost share incentive programs like EQIP. The other category of projects that you can apply for are for implementation. So you can apply for direct forest treatments like small stem thinning, mastication, pruning, and a host of other activities. And NBFIP will reimburse you for some of the cost of treatment. And we have a whole cap rate sheet that will display exactly how much you can be expected to pay for each practice per acreage. And as mentioned, here is kind of the breakdown of costs for forest management plans if you decide you want to apply for that. So your base here, you can see this chart, and I will send along this presentation too, so it's a quick reference for you if you want to check out these numbers. Please keep in mind that if you apply to either the implementation or the planning aspect, make sure that it's something that you can afford after the incentives are paid. We don't want to get anyone into a tricky financial spot where they apply and realize a little bit too late that they can't cover the costs. So in addition to regular forest management plans, you can also apply to mini management plans, existing plan revision, and additional plan addendums. So you don't have to start from scratch if you already have a forest management plan, but recognizing that conditions in the county have changed pretty drastically over the past few years, you might want to consider updating your existing plan if you have one or creating one if you don't. Now, something also to remember with the forest management plan is that to apply, you have to apply with a registered professional forester. They will actually apply on your behalf. So it's very important that you get familiar with our list of local foresters, start reaching out and determining whether or not it's somebody you want to work with and someone you can afford to work with. And I'll show later a list of RPFs who are interested in working with folks on NBFIP. It's a list that is being updated as well. And if you have a suggestion of a forester you know who's not listed, just contact me and I'm sure we can add them to the list. So let's talk about eligibility. So, as I've mentioned probably several times, it's private, non-industrial, small forest land owners. Now, in previous presentations, I think I said that the acreage limit was between 5 and 500. The case now, it's between 5 and 5,000 acres. So, if you have larger properties or you're looking to apply with neighbors, HOAs, that sort of thing, we've increased that acreage limit so you can actually put in an application. The second thing you should keep in mind is if you've received funding from Proposition 68 for forest improvements, including a California Forest Improvement Program since 2018, you are not eligible to apply. And the last part is that applicants who can afford the treatment after the incentive payment. I'm going to keep reiterating that. Remember, it will take a few weeks for you to be reimbursed, so ensure that the funds are there. Just to continue off of project eligibility, the project area itself must be at least 1 acre in size. So the difference is the property has to be at least 5 acres, but the project area can only be as large as one, but no less than 1 acre. Some activities that you can apply for in terms of implementation include reforestation, forest stand improvement, and follow-up fuel hazard reduction activities. And also, as mentioned, a preparation of a management plan by a registered professional forester. But what makes you a good fit for this program? There's a little bit of a distinction. So, someone who's a good fit for this program are applicants who are committed to sustainable forest management. We understand as landowners and land practitioners that management is never a one and done thing. It's a continuous effort. So we want to see that there's a commitment there to continue to steward your forest. Um, Someone else, an applicant who would not be able to implement treatments without the financial support of the incentive program. That's really the point of this program is to allow folks who don't have that money to apply for funding and actually get treatments on the ground. Um, we also are looking for people who already have FMPs developed when they're applying to the implementation aspect of NBFIP. Though it is not required that you have a forest management plan, it does help significantly, both from the programmatic side and the RPF or professional you're working with, to know the conditions, existing conditions of your property, your outlined goals and objectives, and an understanding of treatments that might be most appropriate for your land. So having that as a basis is a really strong way to apply. And another good fit is if your property falls within a disadvantaged community or a severely disadvantaged community. Now, this is a census designation, and I'll show you some links to maps where you can search your property to see whether or not your property falls within those zoned lands. Um, it will be confusing because some places throughout the county, it doesn't quite make sense why they'd be listed as disadvantaged or areas that aren't listed. But it's not our designation, so I'll have to just defer to CAL FIRE, put that together. So let's dive into the implementation activities that are covered under NBFIP. You have quite a few different things to choose from, but I'll start off with professional services. So if you would like to work with a consultant or an RPF, we have funding to help cover some of that cost. As you can see, there's two cost lists here. Um, One for professional services in a non-DAC and one within a DAC or SDAC, and those differ slightly here. And a professional can help you with implementation contract administration, flagging and compliance work within NBFIP contracts, and anything else that you really would request from them, in addition to helping you put together the application. It is important to remember that these rates, unlike most of the others in this program, are not per acre. This is a flat rate. Moving on to timber stand improvement, this is something we see a lot of applicants apply to because it includes small stem thinning, and that includes trees from less than 4 inches in diameter at breast height. We also have large stem thinning, which includes 4 to 8 inches. And I'll just mention that we have had applicants or participants in the past that have asked to increase that limit a little bit, and we've allowed participants to cut up to 12 inches in diameter. But unfortunately, we can't help you remove those very large trees and snags. Some other treatments that we have under timber stand improvement include historic oak woodland enhancement and restoration. That is also another focus of the program is to expand that habitat type and restore it back to the landscape. We also offer forest frailing, which is another word for girdling or slowly killing a tree. Mastication of brush and small trees, and light understory removal and ladder fuel reduction. And as you'll see in this chart, it is adjusted for these different rates. There's 3 different rates that you can apply for through the implementation, and I'll just quickly explain. The 40% rate is something you can opt into. It allows your application to be a bit more competitive if you decide that you can afford a larger share and you really want to get your project funded. 60% is what we see most people apply for, and that's a healthy amount, especially if you are looking to treat large acreage or you just don't have the funding available to cover it yourself. And the 80% rate is only for people whose properties are within the DAC and SDAC. So if you're one of the, lucky few or the qualifying people who can apply for the 80%, it's a good deal there. The next category of treatments is brush management. So we have light hand treatment and heavy hand treatment. And the focus of brush management is really to remove competing vegetation, or we also talk about invasives. I know that Scotch and French broom are a huge issue throughout the county, so this is something that could potentially help you deal with this. And you can see these pictures here. This is taken from a completed NB-FIT project in Santa Rosa. Very stark difference between the before here and the after. You can see clearly that a lot of vegetation has been removed, ladder fuels have been removed as well. Any competing brush has been eliminated from the landscape. Next up is follow-up slash treatments. And follow-up slash treatments are really to deal with the slash generated in the treatments mentioned before or other forest activities that you have been doing on your land. So this includes pile and burning, chipping and masticating, and piling. So we've had quite a few folks who have applied to pile and burn, but throughout the program after they were awarded realized that there were restrictions due to timing, due to rain, contractor availability, burn windows. Um, so we have made exceptions in the past to say that if you weren't able to burn all the piles that you applied for, we can still reimburse you for just piling them. So have no fear there if you can't get it all done. Next, we'll talk about site preparation. And the purpose of site preparation is really to prepare your site for planting, either manually or naturally after you've cleared. So you can have light, moderate, or heavy, and the heavy and moderate indicate more heavy machinery that would be used on site. Next up is reforestation. We also want to encourage folks to start reforesting areas affected by wildfire or disease, pests, whatever else, or encroachment by other trees, less desirable ones. So we provide funding for both planting per seedling. We offer tree shelters to help prevent herbivory from wildlife, 1 gallon pot seedlings and saplings, cages as well. And you can see that most of these in the reforestation are actually based per seedling and not per acre. So that's different from the other practices mentioned. And this is an example of some lovely reforestation efforts that were ongoing by one of our past participants. And then there is pruning. There are 3 different rates for pruning, and this is really just to encourage the health of your trees and prevent the fire from going from the ground story up into the canopy. And here's just a little bit of a guide of how you would prune different types of trees. All right, now that we've got the treatments covered, let's dive into how you actually apply. So applications are accepted on a rolling basis, but are processed for review in 2 batching periods. As you are aware, our batching period 8, I suppose, or 7 is now underway, and the application is open until July 25th. I've pasted a link here for folks who want to follow directly to the website. You can apply online, or you can apply through mail if you want to print it out, if it's easier for you, and to write everything and mail it into us. And while it's not required to have an RPF for implementation practices or for applying to implementation, we highly encourage that you do work with an RPF. Just with the wide breadth of knowledge and scope that they have, it would, I think, benefit you and probably lead you to a more successful application. So I will switch a little bit and just show you the applications if you haven't viewed them yet. So let's start with the FMP application. So you can see the kind of information they're requesting, and that'll be across both applications. Um, but for the management plan application, they want you to list upfront who your RPF is, and they will be the person who actually is doing this for you. Um, so it'll include information, mailing, site address, email, contact, that kind of thing. Um, it's also important to remember they're going to sort of ask you more property information. Let's think about property size, forested acres, canopy cover, the type of management plan you're applying to. Like I mentioned, there's several options. The full forest management plan, mini, existing, and plan addendum. And let's see. And I guess they want to kind of understand what your goals and objectives are. So, in preparation for the application clinic, this is something, if you haven't already, sit down with your fellow landowners and really clarify what your goals are for your property. Some common goals are wildfire risk mitigation, timber harvesting, wildfire recovery, wildlife habitat enhancement. It can really be anything that you want it to be. It is your property and you can manage it according to those goals and objectives. Next, we'll switch to the project implementation, and this is a little bit more burdensome. And if you're not working with an RPF or a consultant, this application will be on you. So at first, it asks very similar questions, landowner, basic information, mailing, email. It'll ask if you are applying with neighbors or a community group, ask about property description information. And I do have a list of sort of these questions and considerations that you should be prepared with for the application clinic. So don't feel like you have to remember all of this now. Going down a bit, you're going to see it's going to ask information about whether or not you have conducted a California Natural Diversity Database record search. If you don't know how to do that, contact me. I can help you, or work with your RPF or consultant to do that. Also going to ask about historical and cultural considerations. If any information center records have been completed. You're not expected to do this. If you already have an NTMP, FMP, or other project that you've done through EQIP or CFIP, chances are you've already done these things. But it's not required of you to do at the time of application. That's something the program can help you do if you are awarded. Then we go down to the treatment practices. So it will ask you specifically, how many acres of TSI1 do you plan to apply to? And it goes all the way down, listing all the activities that I have discussed. So you will just simply put an acreage amount, and that will be across the property. You don't have to do that per unit. You will have to submit a whole host of maps. Now, I know that some people have more capability or have the ability to make maps. Some people have Esri software, some people don't. So if you need assistance with that, you can reach out to the Sonoma RCD or Conservation Works. You can reach out to your RPF or consultant. But this part does trip up a lot of landowners, I see. So I want to give you an example of a map that I absolutely love. So if you can replicate this in some sort of way, I will be a happy camper as I review your applications. And as you can see, this is a multi-parcel neighborhood project, but you can see each parcel is clearly outlined. The treatments are listed at the bottom. It's clearly displayed all over the map, and each treatment also includes an acreage estimate as to how large that particular treatment will be. Um, so it doesn't have to be as detailed as this, displaying the type of water course or even the roads, but just a clear visualization of what you would like to accomplish and where. That saves a lot of time on our side as we're reviewing the applications. It helps that if you do get funded and you are awarded, when we do our pre-operation site visit, really distinguishing what treatments are most appropriate and where. It saves a lot of time, and I think it helps clarify things early on. I see some chats in here. Just wanted to make sure I'm not missing anything. I see Fred, does receiving a prior NBFIP grant limit eligibility? I believe you cannot apply for to treat the same acres, but I don't know, Fred, specifically if you've participated before, whether or not you are barred from participating again. That's a good question, and I'll have to look into that. Certainly not the same acres, but maybe the same property. So I'll have to get back to you on that. So going back to,
Genevieve, there was also a question about the section where you mentioned, I missed the particular type of CAL FIRE grant that, if it has been received since 2018, makes one not eligible. Can you just quickly answer that one?
sure, if you've received Prop 68 funds through CFIP or the California Forest Improvement Program, then you are not eligible to treat those acres.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So I know I went pretty quickly through the applications, but I figured just to give you a brief overview of what they look like, you'll have more time over the next week or so to review them yourselves. Feel free to call, text, email me with any questions. I know that it leaves some of this can be confusing. Not all the information necessarily posted on the website. So reach out anytime if there's something you need clarified. Um, Now that we reviewed the applications themselves, I figured it would be worth actually looking at the project ranking for implementation. Now, before I go into the implementation project ranking, it's probably important to mention in terms of the forest management plans, if you are decide to apply to one, we're trying to fund as many of those as possible. So I'm not even sure what the project ranking looks like. I think it is more determined by the capacity of the RPFs and the staff of project partners. So if you don't get awarded for FMP funding this time, I say just apply again. So to look at the project ranking for implementation specifically, and I don't know if this might be blocking things here. Um, we can look at some of the scoring here. So if you are applying for a lower incentive payment rate, that 40%, automatically you get 5 points right there. So something to consider if you know you have the ability to cover more of the cost, it would make your application more competitive. If the project area has been substantially damaged by fire, insects, disease, or other natural causes within the last 36 months, if that's the case, awarded another point. If your project can be done in conjunction with EQIP contract to allow for greater acreage treated, then you will also be awarded additional points. So if you can increase it by greater than 100%, that's 5 points, and less than 100%, that's 3 points. So that comes into the FAQs we'll go over later, but you can apply if you have an existing EQIP contract. You just can't apply to treat the same acres. Let's see, if you're part of a larger multi-property project, you're awarded an additional 5 points. We have had HOAs apply and be awarded. We have had neighborhood groups apply and be awarded, like that map I just showed you. So it is something to consider. Also, in terms of forest management in general, we need to look at the landscape scale and recognize that if we treat our property, but our neighbors aren't, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good. So we want to work together and collaborate as much as we can. The size of the project also will give you some points. So if it's greater than 20 acres, that's 5, and you can see as it goes down between 1 and 5 is 1 point. So this isn't to say that you should necessarily, just apply to treat as many as acres. We want you to be thoughtful with it and really have an idea of the objectives and goals you're trying to accomplish and whether or not the treatments are the most appropriate. But if you can treat more acres, power to you. We encourage that. Um, as I've said as well, if you have an existing management plan, that gives you a whole lot of extra points. So we really, really encourage that you have one in place. So if you're attending this webinar thinking you are going to apply for implementation, but you don't have a management plan, you might want to reconsider, apply for a management plan this round, and then next batch or the following batch, apply for implementation. That way, you're more likely to get funded and you are more likely to have treatments that are appropriate for your land. You're also awarded another 5 points if your CEQA documentation has been completed and the project is located within a disadvantaged or severely disadvantaged community. You're awarded another 5 points. And before I go on to FAQs, I just want to make sure I don't have any other questions I should address. Good question. If neighborhood groups apply, how does receiving the 1099 work for taxable income? Each individual landowners will receive a 1099. So, on to FAQs. And I guess this will leave a good amount of time for some questions after this, but I wanted to go through. Like I said, having an EQIP contract does not qualify you. We actually encourage that. If you can combine acreage, that would be great. We understand that you have a long-term vision and plan for managing your land. And also, I guess, an indicator that you're not relying solely on MBFIP funds to manage your forest. That's a good indicator to us. Does your project need environmental review permits? Yes, you do. You all have to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act, but the RCD, the Sonoma RCD, will act as a lead agency. Your burden for CEQA compliance is reduced. Fortunately, the program was designed such that most of our projects can go through a simple notice of exemption to the county, which means you can bypass a lot of the kind of onerous environmental review that is inherent to CEQA. It is important to remember, though, that any permits you are required to get require you to pay for. We will not cover that cost, though we will cover the cost of the notice of exemption. So if it finds out through one of your biological searches or archaeological record searches that is a sensitive biological or cultural site on the property, then you would be required to pay for those assessments. So oh dear, how long does it take to complete a project? The total time really depends on the contractor's availability and I guess just nature, precipitation, wildfire, whatever else may happen. Ideally, work will be completed within the season following your application acceptance. We realize that sometimes there's impediments and that can't happen. So in the past, we have had contract extensions. If that's something that has to happen, we don't necessarily want to see it, but things happen. When will you receive payment for completed work? That will happen after the on-the-ground work has been verified. So for implementation, we will do a post-operation verification site visit, which means we'll go to each unit and treatment section and ensure that the work has been done to specifications. If it is not, we may give you more time to fix those issues, or we just simply can't pay you for the work you've done. So be sure to read your contract closely. And like I said, this is why we encourage you to work with an RPF because they are intimately familiar with this sort of work. Payments will be received within approximately 3 weeks after the landowner submits their notification of completion and they've received our verification documentation. I understand that everybody has a different level of understanding of forest management, of their own properties. Everyone's coming in with different experience levels and knowledge base. So at the very least, I'd like you to come prepared with some information, including the assessor's parcel numbers, the acreage of your property, if possible, a map of your property. And I will send you some resources that are at the end of this presentation of how to create maps online. So you don't necessarily have to have, the fancy Esri software to do maps. You can make some pretty basic ones online for free. If you have a forest management plan, please bring it. That can be a digital copy, that can be a printed copy, but it serves as a great reference for the folks at the clinic who are going to help you design treatments. And if you can, your EQIP, RCPP, or EFRP contracts, if you have them, come prepared with them just so we can have an understanding of the sections of your property that have already been treated, the sorts of treatments you have done in the past, how acreage could potentially be expanded with existing contracts. It gives us a good understanding of what has been done, what you plan to do, and where the limitations potentially are in terms of funding. So over the next few days, weeks, until the clinic itself, here's some questions that I think would be really helpful for you to consider. First, off the bat, the easy one, but actually not so easy oftentimes if you're dealing with family. What are your management goals and priorities? Sit down, have a list, just come up with some ideas. It doesn't have to be very concrete. You could be generally, I want to make sure it doesn't burn down. That's great. That's a property goal. Um, I also, I listed earlier on in the presentation, and you'll see on the application itself some examples of common goals, like wildlife habitat enhancement. That's a great one. You like the birds, bird habitat creation, whatever it is. We're not the ones to tell you how to manage your property or what values or goals you should have for it. That comes solely from you. The next question I would ask you is, has an RPF already prioritized specific areas for treatment in your forest management plan? If you have a forest management plan, you'll know that it culminates in a series of vegetation treatment recommendations. And these have been identified by the registered professional forester you've worked with. And oftentimes it will be categorized and prioritized based on what the RPF or expert thinks is most appropriate to meet the goals and values that you've outlined for them. So if, for example, your number one goal is fire resilience or wildfire prevention, then your RPF might, prioritize an area of very dense brush, um, a stand that has far too many trees per acre, that perhaps is near a road or utility line, something that would really protect you and serve that goal in the best way. Um, Also, I would ask yourself which sections of your property have the highest wildfire risk and why. I think across the board, that's probably the top of the list for most people in terms of goals and objectives. So it's something to consider. Which areas are probably best to treat right now as we, start in wildfire season and as you start to prioritize with the funding that you have, what you'd like to do. Something else that's really important to consider that most people don't really think about until it's kind of too late are what are some of the potential barriers to implementation in your project area? So some potential limitations include slope, erosion hazard, proximity to water courses, sensitive biological species, archaeological sites, things of that nature. So really, what could potentially get in the way of you treating this acreage? And are there ways to mitigate those damages or avoid that area altogether? And the last thing, as I've mentioned, can you commit to maintaining the treated area after your MBFIP contract is completed? So, in addition to demonstrating that you are committed to stewarding your forest, we want to make sure that this treatment isn't your one and done, wipe your hands, you're done forever for this section of your property. It's something that has to continually be done. Um, Oh, are you gonna go? Okay. So like I said, this was the map that I had displayed earlier. Super clear what treatments what, how many acres each treatment is. You don't have to replicate it, but something of this nature would be really helpful. And on to some important resources. Like I've said, this presentation will go out to you, so you'll have all these links. But just basically, we have the NBFIP website, the cap rate sheet, instructions for the application, a list of local RPFs that you can contact. And then I listed some mapping tools in recognition of the fact that a lot of people don't have mapping experience, don't really know what the heck I'm talking about when I say shapefile, that kind of thing. That's no problem. And if you get to these links and find out that they're still too confusing, you throw your hands up and say, I don't want to deal with it. That is perfectly okay. You can reach out to me and I can help you or work with an RPF if that's your preference. Some more mapping resources here. Number six is perhaps the most important for for you folks initially, is just to find out whether or not you're in a DAC and SD or SDAC. You click this link, put your address in, and it'll tell you. And that will determine whether or not you're eligible for that 80% rate, which is a sweet deal. So I would say look at that first. And reach out to us. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or to my boss, Jason Wells, who he himself is an RPF. Though I am not yet an RPF, I'm working towards that goal. So I don't have all of the abilities and as an RPF does. I can't sign off on certain documents, prepare certain things, but I can help you to the best of my ability, and that certainly includes, application review, map making, all that sort of thing.